Welcome to the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show live in the On Purpose Woman magazine and global community Facebook page. I'm Ginny Robertson, one of the hosts of the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show, where we talk with real women who are sharing their lives on purpose and bringing their unique gifts to the planet. I'm also the founder and publisher of On Purpose Woman magazine and founder of the On Purpose Woman global community. My guest today is communications coach and marketing strategist, Peg Duchesne, and we're talking about communications that count. Peg, thanks for being with me today.
Ginny, it's a true pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you. But first, I want to tell our viewers a little more about you. Peg Duchesne is a communications coach, consultant, and relationship marketing specialist. She works with overwhelmed entrepreneurs and business professionals to get them noticed by developing and delivering their marketing message. Peg is known as the message therapist because she massages the words so you get more and better leads faster and easier. Is your marketing messy? Peg provides strategic solutions, recommends a myriad of tools to craft your message and make your communications count. Wow, you promised a lot, and I know that you deliver, Peg. So excited to tap into your wisdom today. Thanks. You and I were talking a little bit before we got on here, and we've known each other. We know probably 13, 14, 15 years maybe, right?
Yeah, more than a dozen for sure.
What was that?
More than a dozen for sure.
More than a dozen, yes. And your company is called Duchesne Enterprise. And I've never asked you why. Where did that come from? So could you tell us a little bit about that first?
Sure, I'm happy to. So you'll see my last name is Duchesne. Looks like Duchesne, Duchesne. I've been called all sorts of things, including duck knees. And I said, ducks don't even have knees, right? But as I was thinking about what to name my company, I like to treat my clients like royalty. So I took on the nickname Duchess. And it's also an acronym that stands for delivering unique, creative, helpful, efficient, and strategic solutions. So if you're part of the On Purpose Women community, you know that I'm an advertiser in the magazine. And I have not just one, not two, but 3 ads because I'm a multiple, I wear multiple hats, juggle lots of balls. So I talk about Legal Shield as a solution for families or for individuals or for business owners to have access to an attorney at reasonable prices. I worked for over 30 years in law firms, big law firms in Washington, D.C., and we didn't represent people. We represented clients, and our clients were big corporations. And the billable hours were like $250 an hour for a fresh out of law school attorney. And, $400, $500 an hour for somebody, a more seasoned attorney. So I know the value of having access to an attorney to ask questions and those kinds of things. So that's one of the solutions I provide. Then another one of my ads is for send out cards, which is a wonderful way to send kindness through the mail. And it's great for business people to do follow-up. We always say the fortune is in the follow-up. If you had a meeting with someone, thank them for that meeting. I always do it in a number of different ways. It takes a couple of different touches for people to know who you are, remember what you do, those kinds of things. So an email afterwards thanking them, then maybe a social media connection. LinkedIn is my favorite, but lots of people aren't on LinkedIn, so Facebook, somehow connect with them that way. But then if the day I meet them, I also send them a card, it takes about 5 or 7 days for it to go through the postal service and land in their mailbox. But then a week later, they're getting another reminder of who you are and what you did for them and what they might be thinking about. And, the holiday season is coming up and we're at the end of September, almost the beginning of the final quarter of the year. It's a great way to keep in touch with family and friends as well. I always like to say, send out Thanksgiving cards instead of waiting until Christmas. We're all so busy anyway. And the whole purpose of Thanksgiving is to express gratitude. And what better way to touch base with your family and your clients than to say, thank you so much for being who you are in my world. So,
and I know I love getting that unexpected card in the mail. Because, we just don't get that much mail anymore. At least I don't. I do everything online. But when that unexpected with a handwritten, or it looks like, oh, somebody's actually sending me something personal, that's very exciting. So it's a good reminder.
Definitely. Definitely. And then the final ad in the On Purpose Women Global Community magazine that I do is the bank methodology. And you'll see at the end of my name on the screen here, it says NABK. What on earth does that mean? So it stands for Nurturing Action Blueprint Knowledge. If you're familiar with things like DISC and Myers-Briggs and some of those other psychological personality assessment tools, bank is similar to that, but we say totally different because instead of psychology, it's based on biology. We spell BUY. It's all about the way you like to get information before you're going to make a decision of any kind. So if you're familiar with the love languages and those kinds of things, they say, give a gift, not that you would want, but what your partner would want that might be different from you. We say in bank that we treat people with the platinum rule, not just the golden rule. The golden rule, we all know, treat other people the way we want to be treated. But the platinum rule is treat other people the way they want to be treated, which may be different from you. So if you're interested in learning more about that methodology, we're going to talk about how to get in touch with me later, and I'm happy to share that with you. It's a 90-second quiz. So DISC is about 45 minutes to an hour. Myers-Briggs is an hour and a half. Bank is 90 seconds, a minute and a half, and you get a 27-page assessment about who you are and how you show up and how you like to process information. And I use that tool in my tool belt when I'm working with my clients to craft their message and deliver it into the digital space. Because if they know their client is a nurturing person, for instance, they may want kinds of words and language that speaks to making connections. And if a certain portion of your proceeds go to a charity, that's important to a nurturing person. A blueprint or a knowledge could care less. A knowledge person, that's the K in bank, they need to sell themselves on whatever the idea is. So your job is to give them as much information as they can so they can make a good decision. And so these are kind of the tactics. And bank has a artificial intelligence tool that lets me craft the message. And I'm pretty good, having done bank for about 6 years now, of writing the message to whoever the audience is, or writing it level across all four, because after all, we are all four codes. But then running it through the artificial intelligence tool to make sure I have in fact done what I think I've done. And so that's how I massage the words. We said I'm a message therapist, I massage the words. I use the bank methodology to help me do that.
Okay, so these are all things that comprise Duchess Enterprise, right? And there's so much more that I think you also offer. Now, you're going to share actually how to craft a message with our viewers so that communications will count in their marketing as well as in other life scenarios. That's exciting, and I want to know more about that. But I also would like to do a little background first. Have you always been a fan of words and communication and marketing? You said you worked in law firms. Did you use it there?
I did. And I'm going to back up even further than law firms and go back to 3rd and 4th grade.
Okay.
When I was in young elementary school, I went to a Catholic school, and the nuns taught us about diagramming sentences. And I was fascinated by the way adjectives and adverbs related to the nouns and the verbs. And I just loved that about words and how they played off each other and the meaning that they had. And I read every book in the Nancy Drew series. She was like my heroine of of my day, and just loved the words. And so fast forward to the law firm job, when one of the lawyers on the litigation team knew that I was a really good proofreader, he wouldn't let anything go to court without me having a PD in the corner saying and so, that's a very nice feather in my cap, but it's also a lot of pressure to make sure everything was perfect. So words have always fascinated me, and having spent so many years, it wasn't my whole job was proofreading, but having had that responsibility for a period of time, I can't go to church and look at the bulletin that they give you they jump out at me. I don't find them. I don't go looking for them. They find me. They jump out at me, and I'm like, oh, that could have been said differently. So it's important how we use our words, and we all can agree that words matter. The words we use matter. How we respond to people matter. And sometimes the best response is just take a deep breath and think about it for a minute before we say things. So
Yes. Great advice there, that's for sure. I too have a background in some of that. I was initially a language arts major in college because I was told that I should be a teacher because, in 1969 when I graduated, that's what you either were, a teacher or a nurse or a secretary or a housewife. And none of those appealed to me. And so teaching was the least offensive of all of them. But then I dropped out of college full time and ended up going back at night and got a degree in business administration in finance. So very, very different things. But yet there's always this word thing. I think I'm a pretty excellent proofreader too, an editor kind of person, because they do the typos just jump out. I'll get somebody's book that they've had read, they've had edited and proofread, and I'll open up a page and go, wait a minute, that they needed a comma there, or that word's spelled wrong. So it can be quite, it's a great skill, but it can be also kind of annoying in our brain sometimes, can't it? You
can,
can't
for
enjoy
sure.
the story for looking at the typos there. But
Right.
and Nancy Drew is also, I wanted to be Nancy Drew, and I was talking to somebody about that not long ago, and I said it was two main reasons. One is that three, she had this little blue roadster convertible. Two, her parents let her go do dangerous things and solve mysteries. And three, she had a boyfriend named Ned, who was a supporting character. Do you remember? He always supported her. He didn't try to do it for her. And I just thought those were the coolest three qualities that Nancy Drew had there. So
I love that you reminded me about Ned, her boyfriend. That
yes, yes,
what a great supportive role model
yeah,
that is. So,
yeah. And so I took us down a little road there, but let's talk about the power of words in communication. And when you talk about it, you mean all aspects. You're talking about spoken, emails, social media posts, blogs, articles, even your bios, right, on your website.
And even text messages.
Even text messages. Yeah, and we can get really sloppy with text messages, can't we? What are some of the mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making with their messaging?
So one mistake would be that just flying off the hook and not giving much thought to it and just thinking, this is what I'm saying, and just putting it out there without, I like to create a message, think about who my audience is that I want to receive the message. Will these words resonate with them? I'll write a draft and then I'll walk away, take a break, and then come back to it. Because I think that reflection, our subconscious mind is working on it, even if we're not actively thinking about it. We are, it's there and we're massaging it, so to speak. And you come back and you go, oh yeah, I want to change this and this. And I think giving it time and space is an important aspect of creating and getting ready to deliver a message. And that's where I think we fall down on emails and text messages. We're in such a hurry and we just have to blurt it out. And at the very least, if you're in a hurry, and I acknowledge that we're all rushed, take a second and reread it. And when you're reading it, not just the words, but say it out loud. Because that's how sometimes you'll catch, that just doesn't sound right. That's not how I meant it. And then that'll help you rearrange some of the words or think of different words that will land better on who your recipient is. So giving it time and space. And, time could be 5 minutes, but right. I think it'll prove valuable in the long run.
I do love the idea of reading it out loud because I think we can also feel the energy behind it. Like, because, if I know that if I write something that isn't about anger, but if I'm angry, even it's something else, it could come across maybe a little testy and we can't always tell the feeling behind something if we just hit send right away. So I love that advice a lot. Are there any other things that that you see consistently that entrepreneurs do that kind of get in the way of their message?
Sometimes, like, let's take bios, for instance. You're going to send somebody a bio and you have a bio and you just send them your ordinary, typical bio. I always like to personalize it based on if you're going to be a podcast guest or who the audience is or what the purpose of the call is or why you're sending that, because it's not always cookie cutter, one fits all. it needs to be tweaked in some way, shape, or form to land right with what the purpose of the message of any kind. And I just use bio as an example because I see a lot of people just sending the same thing to all kinds of different audiences. And I think it's not as effective. It's not that it's wrong. It's just
Right.
not as effective as I think we want to be.
Yeah,
So,
because if you're going to be on a podcast and you have a specific area of expertise that may not show up in your bio, right? More people might want to see it and watch it. So I think that's great advice. And sometimes we have that limit of like 50 words too. So we need to choose those 50 words carefully. I think that's what you're saying, right?
50 words is 75 is so much more grace. And, I did something for a client recently where it needed to be there. I was doing their LinkedIn profile, and it's a certain amount of characters. And you have to really be selective and get the meat of the matter in a short amount of time. And it's a good exercise to put yourself through to choose the best words possible. It's when that thesaurus comes in handy, and that walking away and thinking about it and coming back again.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So let's dive in now to this idea of crafting a message that speaks to your ideal client, that says who you are, maybe not just as a person or not just as a business person, but as a person, which is another question. Maybe you can answer it along with this that just came to me. When we're doing business correspondence, how much of the personal self do we want to bring in? Or how much of the, I know there's such a thing as too much information, but we can also turn into like an automaton if we're just always talking about business. So maybe you could weave that in to talking about this crafting your message. And I'm going to take notes.
One of the things that I think is so valuable, if you're working on a message that you're sending to, let's say they're not yet a client, but they're a prospect and you want to nurture that relationship, sharing with them a little bit of insight about what's behind the curtain, how you operate that might be a little different from your competitors, how you like to be communicated with, and how, find out how they like to be communicated with, and show that you're different in whatever way, shape, or form. And that can get to the personal values and attributes and the experience that you have, that, we're all unique and different. We all have different experiences that play into who we become as we go through life, and highlight what makes you special and unique, and what the value would be of working with you versus somebody else, and understanding what their end game is, what they hope to achieve as an end result, and how you can get them there faster or in a more complete way than, and not so much in a comparative sense. It sounds like I'm comparing, but just talk about the unique value proposition that you bring to the table, and how that would speed up what they're trying to achieve, those kinds of things.
Okay, great advice. Thanks. So let's talk about the steps to craft a powerful message that will attract our ideal clients.
Like I said, understand where they're coming from, what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve. And this is, again, is more in a business sense. Or if you're crafting a message for social media, think about the end user that you're hoping is going to respond in any way, like your page, like your comment, make a comment to your comment, all the things that make the algorithms work so that more people see your messages on social media and those kinds of things. Again, thinking about the end result of each and every message will help you get there by, giving it some thought, being careful and considerate, walking away and coming back and tweaking it. Those are my tips.
Okay. So are you also saying that we, even though we're promoting ourselves or promoting a business, we also have to be mindful about who will read it, and make sure that it's kind of about them instead of us? Is that what
It
you're
is
saying?
definitely about them.
Okay.
So put yourself in their shoes. If, you know, if I were talking with a busy professional who knows that marketing's important, but doesn't have the time of day to figure out what platform on social media would be best for them, what algorithm, what time of day to post, they don't know. Sharing with them how my experience will help them fast forward to utilizing the right platforms for the audience that they're seeking and utilizing the artificial intelligence tool I talked about with Bank to make sure my message is on point so that you do hit the mark with your marketing, and then tweaking. And then one of the key things that I think busy people don't take time to do is when somebody comments or likes it or puts in an emoji or something, correspond back with them, engage in a conversation, keep the conversation going. Don't just let it drop and post new things. Go back and see who actually made a comment. And I love emojis because they're like the hieroglyphics of current day language, right?
Yeah.
And somebody puts a laugh until they're crying kind of comment, or what struck you as so funny would be the response, I would say.
Mhm.
Just find a way to keep that conversation going and inquire, ask open-ended questions, because the more you can get them talking and engaging, the better it would be. The other thing I want to say, and the past couple of years, we've had such a tumultuous time on social media and, the political banter back and forth and whatnot. Whether you like a post or do an angry face, the algorithm doesn't know whether you're liking it or disliking it. It just sees it as an interaction. So if you want to see less of something, don't respond in any way, shape, or form. Because when you respond, even if it's in a negative, like an angry face, that's an engagement. And so
Okay.
it thinks you want to see more of that.
That's
So,
really important because it also is amplifying that message more that you
Right.
hope nobody else sees, right?
right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go back a minute to the making sure that you respond to people on social media. I see that often. I have a fairly large Facebook group, and I'll see it often where somebody might even ask a question. Oh, I'd like to know more about that. And nobody ever comes back. Sometimes I'll go in and I'll tag the person again and say, you might want to see this, but I obviously can't catch that all the time. But there's lots of missed opportunities that are just right there waiting for us to pick them up. And instead we're out there, beating the bushes for the other stuff that isn't so easy.
The next best thing instead of going back. And that also is a great reminder that you might be ready to move on to the next thing, but the low hanging fruit might be already there. You just haven't noticed it.
Right. Yeah.
So I always say the fortune is in the follow-up. When we used to network in person all the time, and we're getting back to doing that again, or even when you're on Zoom or other online platforms, making connections with people that you've not met before or haven't seen in a long time, I always recommend that we book an appointment within the next 24 to 48 hours after for the follow-up. So if you're at a 90-minute meeting, sometimes 20, 25 minutes is enough. If you're at a 2-hour meeting, it might take a half hour or 40 minutes to do all the follow-up. Connect with them on LinkedIn or connect with them on their business Facebook page, or, connect with them however they asked you to connect with them, or find them and make those outreach kind of messages that say, it was so great to meet you. And I always make notes about what people said. And what resonated with me was this that you said about your child, or the challenge you're having with this at your work, or whatever, because that makes a person feel so valued. You heard them. And that goes back to Maslow's hierarchical needs. Even a little baby wants to be cooed over and held, and, just before they even know to eat and walk and talk by themselves, they have that need for assurance and reassurance and acknowledgement that we're there and who we are and what we do. So
Yeah.
those are the recommendations I would have.
Okay. Kind of a sense of belonging, like,
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
let's say that I'm at an online networking meeting, and there's, I go to this one, we're both members of the Women's Prosperity Network. And they'll have meetings sometimes with 100 or more women, but we get to go into breakout rooms, which are really great because then you can meet. But I've been in breakout rooms before the women, and there may only be one woman there that I feel like I resonate with or that said something. And so, do you believe that we need to also be, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word that I really like, which I can't find right now. I'll just say thoughtful, maybe in lieu of the other word, which will come to me, about how we spend our time following up. Because I will sometimes, not just in that group, but in other groups, will get follow up from people who really, I think they're just trying to sell me something. We didn't really connect. We didn't really have anything in common.
Right.
What do you say about that? I mean, how do we handle,
the
given
first
that we've
thing I
got this
would say
block of
is-
time, right?
The first thing I would say is don't be that person
Exactly. Don't be that
just trying
person.
to sell someone. Oh, good, another warm body. Ask questions that, how did you get started in the line of work you're in? Or, the more you know about the other person, then you can hear what needs they have and how whatever your product or service is may be helpful. It's not like you've already made the decision they need this. They
Right.
need to make the decision themselves that they need it. So keep it conversational. I really liked what you said about XYZ. Tell me a little more. Or, find, if it's one of these worldwide or nationwide communities, find out where they're located. If you've been there or know things about their town or city, just start a conversation and then see how it unfolds and develops. It's a relationship.
Mhm.
It's not just a warm body to whom you can sell. And you will turn off more people than you will attract, the
I
whole
agree. I
honey and the
agree.
bees kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be my recommendation.
So I think what you're talking about, which is one of my favorite things to do, is to just be curious about this person, genuinely curious. And you have to be kind of curious in life to be able to do that. I think it's kind of hard to turn that off and on, but ask questions. Again, I was at something in person. It wasn't a business thing, it was a social thing, sitting there with 7 other women around a table, and not one person, I was asking all these questions and not one person asked me a question back about me. And I went home and I went, that's so unusual. Usually people find me way more fascinating. And then I realized I didn't resonate with them, apparently, and that's okay. It's okay. I didn't go into this deep funk about it, but I was kind of surprised by it because, Peg, you and I are out there a lot.
Well, and it
we
says a
connect
lot
well.
about a person to whom you've asked a bunch of questions and they don't even have one to ask back. I mean, repeat the same question back to me.
Yeah,
Anything
exactly.
original or unique, but yeah, I'm a huge fan of, when I left corporate America back in 2007, I came in contact with a gentleman named Bob Berg, and many people may know Bob Berg. A year later, after I met him, he and John David Mann, his co-author, published The Go Giver. And it's very much about give value, give more in value than you receive in compensation, because then you'll never want for anything in life. And there's a whole series of books, The Go Giver, The Go Giver Sells More, The Go Giver Leader, The Go Giver Influencer, all those. And just phenomenal. And Bob Berg is still my mentor to this day, 15 years later. And just last week, I had the opportunity to meet not meet, I've known him for a while, but to be able to interview the co-author of The Go Giver, who, John David Mann, he and his wife just this spring published The Go Giver Marriage.
Oh, nice.
And I've never been married, but I love this book. It's a parable in the beginning, just like all the Go Giver series are. But it talks about it's communication in all sorts of ways. Just like we were talking about, acknowledge the other person, let them know that you heard them. And it goes so far in the relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, a parent to a child, siblings to one another, a boss to an employee, all those kinds of relationships. It's all about, we need to show up and be curious, exactly what you said. Be curious, ask questions, and then isn't it curious that they don't ask questions back? That just, I think, is very telling about, and they may be the ones that are just ready to, like, as soon as I connect with somebody on LinkedIn or they send me a connection request, when I accept, and all of a sudden I get a ding that they've already automated this whole big entourage about what they have and why I need it. Well, you know, somebody just this morning said, you might not know that you need a LinkedIn business page. You really need a LinkedIn business page. Well, if you looked at my LinkedIn, you'd see I have a LinkedIn business page. So they need to be curious and do their homework first before
Yeah.
they start selling. So yeah.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I heard someone speak on LinkedIn one time and she was real big on that, on automating that process. But I know every time I get one, I have this visceral reaction to it. You have no idea who I am. You don't know who I am yet. You didn't even say hello first. It's like this because it's in their whatever, their automated process, I guess. And I could never, I'm not on LinkedIn that much. I aspire to be more, but I just, that would never work for me because it would just feel, yeah. And there are people, maybe there are people, and you can attest to this from the bank, you know, people who have a certain letter in the bank program who would want to be informed that way. Maybe, I don't know, but I have to feel good about how I'm doing it.
Well, even the
as well.
knowledge people that are the Ks that want a lot of information, I don't believe they like to get it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
You know, and as you said, and as I'm saying, be curious, ask questions. Bob Berg often says, a prospect or client never hung up on me while they were talking. So the more questions you're asking and the more they're talking. The other quote I like is, be interesting by being interested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Be interested in them, ask enough questions so that they're telling you, and then you'll say, oh, the fact that you said that makes me think of this. And then you ask more questions, they talk a little more, and then you remember some of it and you follow up, you take notes if you're online, if you're in front of them. One of the biggest compliments when we were meeting in person was I would take a fine tip Sharpie pen, because some business cards used to be glossy and you couldn't put a ballpoint pen to them. But I would say, do you mind if I write that down? And then it's such acknowledgement that you want to take notes about the person. They appreciate that you're interested.
Yeah.
So
I love that quote. No one has ever hung up on me when they were talking. That is so funny and so true.
that's a Bob Bergism for sure. Yeah.
And that takes me back to, you know, in the early days, the first days of the On Purpose Woman Global Community, I had this idea. I had no idea what I was doing, Peg, but I had this idea that I didn't want it to be an event where everybody just shoved their business cards in each other's faces. And I would say, in fact, Catherine Yarborough mentioned to me a while back that, because you don't say that much anymore. I think it'd be good to get back to that and talk about that more. I would say, be curious and be interested in about the person who's across from you, because they're there for a reason. And ask them questions and talk with them. And somebody would say, well, what if I talk with them and ask them questions? They don't ask me any. And I'm like, well, then they're not your people.
Right.
They're just not. So there can't be this fear of I've got to get my words in. I've got to get my message in. And I'm going to take this full cycle now, because if we're listening, if we're asking questions, if we're in a room, in a Zoom room, or in person, it makes that follow-up email that you've been talking about so much more genuine, because we actually have something to say to the person.
Right.
That they said back, not something, you know. I remember you know, going to big networking events in person where you'd leave your cards on the table and I'd get an email. It was so nice to meet you. I knew we hadn't met. They had just pulled my card off the table. And I would rather somebody say, in fact, I've done that. I pulled your card off the table and I was interested. Just be honest about stuff, right?
Exactly.
Just be honest and authentic.
And Ginny, you know, I've been involved in BNI, Business Network International, for about 15 years as well. When I got out of corporate America, this whole world of entrepreneurship opened up to me. So BNI was one of them. And Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, always talks about being the person you're talking about, where you're just grabbing cards and not having a conversation. Just give me your card. Okay, yeah, well, I'll have my girl call your girl, whatever. And the person that leaves with the biggest stack of cards at the end is a winner. He said, I could put a dog in the room with a apron over him and, you know, just drop your card here kind of thing. That's the equivalent of what those people are doing without having a conversation. So yeah, it definitely starts with, it's called networking because you need to have the network to build to the future of the relationship, to go on to whatever the future is.
And it's really been nice to see that evolve. You know, I've had this community for 22 years, to see it evolve out there with both men and women. It's not just, you know, initially I thought it's just women doing it this way. It's just women having this heart-centered stuff. But it's been really nice to watch a lot of different organizations really start to tap into the importance of the relationship and communication building that you are so great at talking about and teaching.
Well, and Ivan Meisner wrote a book called, he said, it was Networking and Sex, It's Not What You Think. And it was a survey. I mean, at this point BNI now is in 75 countries around the world, but this book probably came out around 10 years ago. And it was a survey that went to all the women in BNI, all the men that went to BNI, and the way the different genders would network. And nowadays we have the binary, you know, I don't even like to say good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, because some people don't resonate with either one of those. So how's everybody doing? How are all the great people out there, or something like that? But in this day and time, it was a survey of men and women and how they network. And then what the survey said, and understanding the other gender. So quite often men would come in and they, did you see the game last night? And it's all about sports analogies and everything. And women are more often interested in the connections, or who you know, or how your kids are doing, and those personal relationship kinds of things. And then recently heard a statistic where you're at a convention, you have, you know, 5 minutes left. Okay, we have time for one more question. So people have had their hand up for a good long while. And then more often than not, we only have time for a few more questions. Most of the women put their hand down, and most of the men are going, who? Well, who do you think the speaker's going to call? They didn't even notice them. So being aware as speakers of that, kind of how we show up and how we as speakers need to acknowledge, you know, it's just interesting how,
you know, women tend to like read the room and pay attention to the rules a little bit more, maybe, and things like that. That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So Peg, how can our viewers learn more about you and what you offer?
Thanks, Ginny. The best way is to find me on LinkedIn. So it's linkedin.com and then my name. You can Google me, and LinkedIn is one of the first things that shows up. If you're interested in knowing more about that 90-second quiz to know your bank personality, I'm happy to do that. Just put bank or quiz or something like that in the message to me. And if you want to know about Send Out Cards or Legal Shield or anything else, and especially about marketing and how I can help the readers do more with their social media or their bios or their About Us sections, their blog, their LinkedIn profile, those kinds of things, just let me know what you'd be interested in having a conversation about. And that's what it'll be, a conversation.
Okay, I will put that LinkedIn link into the text. I'll edit the text after we finish here today. But
Thanks
before
so
we
much.
wrap up, I would love to hear any final words of wisdom for our viewers, or maybe you want to just emphasize something you've already said that you really want us to take away.
So one of the quotes I love about communication is that communication works for those who work at it. And so, you know, if the one tip you take away from today is that before you hit that send button on your email, or before you send the text, either read it aloud or give it space and come back 5 minutes later, or half hour later, the next morning, if it's not time sensitive, just give it space. Those who work at their communications make their communications work. So that would be my takeaway.
Thank you so much. And that's also great if you're writing a message, like I say, that maybe a personal message to someone that you're upset with. Don't ever send that right out of the gate either, because you may change your mind about what you want to say down the road a little bit. So thank you, Peg, so much for sharing your wisdom with us. And it's been a real joy talking about this with you.
Likewise, I enjoyed the time.
And thank all of you for joining us for the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show live in the On Purpose Woman magazine and global community Facebook page. If you love this interview and want to share it with your friends, it will be up on our YouTube channel in the next 48 hours. So go over to YouTube and put in On Purpose Woman Global Community. And I would suggest that you subscribe there, because right now we have over 150 great videos of these interviews, as well as some of our speakers at our On Purpose Woman Global Community gatherings. These are things that will inform you, inspire you, educate you, that you will find fun, entertaining, all kinds of great stuff over there. This Friday, September 21st, I'll be doing another interview with spiritual teacher, coach, psychotherapist Liz Gall Lerner. We'll be talking about making an inspired choice. The time is now. You can always find out what's coming up on the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show by going to my website, opwgc.com, and clicking on the On Purpose Woman magazine. Look for the spread and the table of contents. And while you're there, check out the rest of the magazine. Look for our speaker Peg's ads there and see what might speak to you. Thanks again.